you ready to go first? Oh, no, I don't want that. Oh, what? One of So which group is it?
Pain.
Pain. Oh,
Pain. This is our pain.
The bum.
Oh.
Pain in the bum. That's what we are.
I quickly.
I'll do the first.
Okay, are we ready? Oops. You can bring a cup of tea if you need to, yep. So according to my memory, we had a group of people who were exploring people who might have pain as something in common. We had another group working with dancers, office workers, mental health, children and seniors. Fantastic. Okay. The people playing with pain have very kindly conceded that they will go first. So we're just thinking about what might be some of the common beliefs or attitudes that people in this group might share, and how would they manifest and kind of conflict or challenge attitudes that we might be expecting to find in the group. Over to you guys.
Okay, so
other people, it would be nice if you could bring your attention.
all right, so with people with pain, we thought that they would have certain beliefs around areas that they can move and areas that they can't move, that perhaps the area that they experience pain in shouldn't move in a certain way. Things like, oh, I shouldn't twist, or I shouldn't bend. We sort of felt that they may feel that they're always going to have pain, and that may then hinder their ability to learn and to change. They may have perceptions around what is good posture, that I have to keep myself straight all the time. That they're maybe looking for someone to fix them, and perhaps if no one has been able to fix them to this stage, then if the surgeon can't help me, if the doctor can't help me, then how are you going to help me? Or
alternatively, now that I'm here, I expect to be better after one lesson.
You're going to fix me?
Yep.
And then perhaps taking sort of a passive approach to that as well. Being sort of very focused on their diagnosis, or it's my C6, or it's the OA in my hip, or whatever it is, and they're not looking at sort of the bigger picture. And perhaps they're very sort of fearful perhaps about doing certain things, particularly new things.
So that was what we thought would be some shoulds and always and nevers.
Mm-hmm.
And when we got to how that would conflict with our intentions in teaching ATM, then the idea of them considering to move in a different way perhaps might cause them to be fearful, or it might be confronting, and they might have a sense of right or wrong, and that their sense of right and wrong way to do something might be very strong. So they might do something unsafe in an ATM because they're used to pain, and they may think it's okay to push through, or to be accepting of pain, or different pain. They might think that's just part of it. So keeping them comfortable, or keeping them at least willing to stay very small. The conflict may be that they be more focused on the actual physical movements than actual learning, because they're focused on the fact that they have physical pain, and so moving them into the idea of considering what different parts of themselves might be involved or what might be happening. I'm not sure what I meant by that.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess what I was talking about before, the having a more of a passive role, that you want them to be an active participant in it.
Yep.
Sure. How could we bring them into awareness in a way that would allow them change? So providing education, relating movement to everyday activity, showing them other options, experiencing the benefit of ATM, just the experience itself, and also developing a trust through touch. And education on the cause of pain, just, I guess, providing them more ideas about, that there are other factors that impact on what causes pain other than just a physical injury.
Mm-hmm.
And gradual, so sort of, I guess, approaching things gradually and in a non-confronting way, and sort of taking baby steps to make sure that there's a level of challenge, but not too much to sort of throw them off. And I guess really focusing on helping them find comfort and really exploring that, and helping them sort of explore that in a way that's that they can then be more proactive and able to do more for themselves on their own, rather than seeking that from the other.
So that's actually really an important one to play with, and probably for other interest groups as well, this idea of comfort. And what's the difference between, it's okay, and, that's actually a little less comfortable, and, that's a little more comfortable. That many of us, being tough grown-up people, or burnt, pain-filled, bitter people, have learnt to just accept and tolerate whatever's there and not to make a fuss. I mean, that's a big rule that many of us were taught as a children, Suck it up, princess, get on with your life. This is no big deal. But that whole process of learning the difference between, I can tolerate it, and that is actually a little better, starts to loosen up some of those beliefs around, this is the only way it can be, and I'm the victim of the pain or the circumstance, that I can start to influence myself and my situation to some degree. Yep. That's next week's process. Yep. Okay, so helping people start to recognise that some of those things are not absolute, that there could be differences and variations, more and less. Cool. Okay. Who would like to be next group? Yep.
So Karen and I did dances. We're doing a particular sort of dancer, not classical, more just people who are interested in dancing.
I have to say something beforehand. The worst came to the worst, so I didn't participate. I didn't have much to tell, and I lost the paper. Or I have the paper at home, which we did together.
Which is okay because I can remember it. So in the two sections, if the shoulds and rules thing, movement and learning.
Yep.
So with that group of people, to do with movement, the things that I thought we thought could get in the way were some of the ideas about what that are incumbent in the method. So small movements, going slow, reducing effort, that for dynamic dancers who are used to be big and extreme, they might be anathema to them in some sense. And therefore you might need to push through that. So that's in a movement level. And then in the learning level.
So their belief would be around big is good?
Yeah. Big is good. Pushing is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Reducing effort is counterintuitive, kind of.
Yep.
And then in like obstructions to the learning or to the method, I thought just maybe ideation about the preconceptions about Feldenkrais method, i.e., it's for old people, it's outdated.
Already?
It's too esoteric. It's something to do with religion. All the things that I'm getting really, really used to hearing every time I talk to people about it, particularly the religion thing. Because it's Feldenkrais, you see. Oh, Feldenkrais, yeah, Feldenkrais. So I've taken to calling it Feldenkrais now. Because German's easier for people to accept. So yeah, no, they're the kind of things. And then, so in answer to that, it's just about, like getting people in and doing something really illustrative and effective in terms of the movements and going. So that learning becomes really obvious, like why to go smaller, why to reduce the effort to be able to really sense and start feeling something. Oh, and the other things with dancers, dancers might be, into full extension and really, there's thrusting movements and ideas about pointed toes and all this sort of stuff that, might get in the way as well.
Did you come up with any examples of some wording or an activity that might help them have an aha experience?
Yeah.
And the dog ate those as well?
On the bit of paper, I can't remember. Not any particular lessons as such, but certainly the various attributes that would be embedded in a lesson that would then, in and of themselves, reveal that those things actually are useful and can be effective and don't need to be resisted.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of just drawing their attention to those as you go through the lesson.
Yeah, like having a felt experience of how this can actually be effective for me in my composition in the day-to-day or in a dancing context.
Yep.
So, and even something as simple. Well, I'm going to do this next week. Actually, I'm doing a workshop at Rainbow Serpent Festival. So I was saying to Julie, so I've got an potential audience of 15,000 people.
Yes.
So I expect to have maybe, I don't know, 30 or... No, I'm serious, there'll be 30 or so people there. And so I've been thinking, okay, here we go. But we were just talking about it. So I was thinking to do the standing one and just feeling the transfer of weight around different parts of the feet and getting that idea of flexibility through the system and different ways that the movement can flow through. I mean, it's just so beautiful and it's so simple as a way of exploring those relationships and movement of weight. I thought it's a really easy and effective way to illustrate some of those principles of you don't need to be pushing, don't need to be expending a lot of effort to make those understandings. And then, full contrast, to do the spiraling onto your feet lesson from the elusive obvious. So starting sitting and rocking the knees and spiraling up to give festival goers who are probably fairly dynamic on the whole and are used to dancing and walking around for 5 days, etc., to give them an experience of the absolute dynamism that is also part of the Feldenkrais method, and in so doing to completely explode this notion that it's only small movements and it's
cool. Yeah. So I know Julie's been talking to you about when you're teaching, having a big picture in mind, having an intention or something that you want people to get out of the lesson. And part of that will be the movement thread, but part of it will be what idea or concept or myth do you want to explode for them. And so by thinking through some of these frameworks, what might the issues be that you can then link their experience to as you're giving the lesson. We'll give you a thread and we'll give them some kind of meaningful concept to take away and talk to other people about. Great.
And then so I'm going to use that as my platform for launching regular ATM
Fantastic.
sessions.
So you'll have your publicity ready to hand out.
He will.
He will. And anybody else that's got classes ready to go might like to share with Simon that preparation so that people have a whole offering of things to pick up.
That would be great, Shona. Joel.
Fantastic. That's the dancers. Okay, who's next?
Okay. So we're synthesizing right now. So chime in whenever you need. So our group was mental health, and we thought right from the start, the labeling of it might be a delicate issue where people may or may not want to identify as having mental problems. And even just like with how you get information interviewing people, saying to them, I'm interviewing you because you have problems, is probably not the way to get that. So we were labeling our group mental well-being instead. And we thought, related to rules, that society has a lot of rules, and part of their mental health things might be because they're always struggling to fit into the rules that society has. So they're always coming up against, I'm supposed to be like this. This is the rules. I find it really hard to be like this. So they've always got this kind of thing about how they should be.
Yeah, so that kind of place might involve the experience of always trying to follow the rules and trying to do as you're told, but always somehow getting it wrong, or not seeming to have a grip on how it's supposed to work out. So that's another struggle.
So if you're told one thing but your inner experience is something different, your tendency might be to shut off what your inner experience is and invalidate that, because that's not supposed to be from what you're told. And then getting in, kind of caught in this cycle where it's always like this. When this happens, I always do this, not open to possibilities so much. And kind of identifying maybe with their problem and their failing as a attitude, and some things that they could just probably never conceive for themselves, that it was just too far out of the realm of what they've experienced, that they just don't have any sensory things to like imagine to head towards that.
It's also the fear of the change, which might be a barrier. Yeah, the fear of changing from where they are, and just their inability to find a solution themselves. So they're so stuck in their pattern of behaviour, as well as not really understanding the concept of reward, if they've always felt deficient from growing up in a society that, you know, has expectations of them.
Yeah, so I think, you know, in the movement stream, it could be a sense that the body doesn't matter because there's so much emphasis on what's wrong mentally. And in the learning stream, the experience of I can't cope, that sort of, it's all about me. and I always get it wrong. So the learning thread is turning around the lack of self-efficacy, perhaps, even in some tiny way. And if we're talking about the sort of later part of the life spectrum, rather than the, as well as the early part, but if it was the later part, an attitude that it's my age and decline is what I should expect and not growth.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the challenges.
Yeah, one thing I kind of realised was that maybe they kind of feel like they have bigger problems, so why should they come to this class? What's the use? I'm too busy, caught up in my other life challenges. So also they're not used to trusting their own judgments because other people have set the... So to start teaching ATM, we're asking them to start sensing themselves, and they may be scared of going internal because of what they'll find, because it's been a turbulent place. And the ideas about not being good would be a barrier towards trying something new, because they don't want to just have another feeling of inadequacy. And if they don't think anything can change anyway, what's the use?
It's about them taking and making decisions, which is going to be the thing we're going to be suggesting to them in a form of movement. And to do that, they'll need to evoke a curiosity. And, these might be new concepts for them, so they might actually work. And sort of to self-regulate and be mindful. So these are things that they're not used to doing, possibly. And, to sense their fear and anger and frustration of a lifetime of being questioned, whether themselves, and to build a positive relationship just with themselves, and that they can then extend to others.
Yeah, so there you're hearing the conflicts with the teaching intentions. Feldy isn't going to give instructions. We are inviting someone to discover that they have got options, and the suggestion is that they can find ease and comfort and peace. So that's the conflict, but also brings us into how we're going to bring them into the awareness that could allow change. You go first.
So it's about looking for ease, that's emphasising that that's what we're doing. So we're looking for how that they will find ease within themselves. So I think that would be an appealing prospect. And that learning is actually giving your brain new circuitry, that you're going to go out of the round and round that you're going in, so that it'll be like a pattern interrupt to start on a different tangent. And that you get to choose what's right for you, that no one else is going to be making those rules.
So I think the way that Feldenkrais can help to bring people into a sense that change is possible is through pretty reliable experience of feeling better physically. And then experiencing the capacity, the self-efficacy to release and therefore reduce aches and pains and release tonus, and in that way have this journey of self-discovery into a better way of moving and a better way of feeling about yourself. And that I suppose the bigger learning intention there is that they would have some experience, small and then bigger, of how they can act to soothe their nervous system and sort of change the way the world looks to them.
Do you think if they changed their way of feeling physically, that would have any effect on their mental or emotional state? Would it be worth drawing their attention to that, perhaps?
Yeah, well, I think because it's a movement process, the big benefit for them is that they can be focused and mindful on themselves, and then sense that change in a movement way first, something that they're not maybe used to bringing their attention to, because all these people are very bright and thinking, you know, that they really do latch on to new ideas. So sensory mindfulness, you know, that will really lead them to think about, you know, all those other changes that we just mentioned.
Yeah, so I think for me, a sort of summary is that there's an experience of hope in sensing change that you've been able to bring about yourself.
So if it's your mental or emotional state that is not as manageable as you would like to have it, and you start to have an experience that begins to change that state, bringing their awareness to the fact that they have some control over that is going to be useful. So like with the people with pain, finding comfort, is this more comfortable, less comfortable? When you're in this position, do you feel more calm or less calm, more anxious or less anxious? Might be some useful sort of bringing awareness that there is actually a control panel for emotions, which is a big belief in our culture that we cannot affect our emotions. Emotions just are. You can change your thoughts, you can change the pictures that you make in your head, but our culture has this very strong unwritten rule that you cannot choose your emotions. But we've all had experiences where we've got up after a lesson feeling calmer or more excited or more interested in going and doing something. And so really taking the opportunity to bring that to awareness is going to have the potential to bring hope in a way that just feeling better physically, I mean, that's nice. We all like that. But if you're not very in your body, you mightn't have been aware of how you felt physically to start with, but you know how you feel mentally and emotionally.
So would you do that during the lesson or at the end where
You could do it
I mean,
at
I
any
did
time.
go to one on anxiety with a girl tipping from Perth,
Oh,
I think.
Molly, yeah.
And I found it quite a strange experience combining the two. Where we had to think about a situation of not gross sort of anxiety that day, but just mild anxiety that occurred to you, and then think how that, you know, you might be able to resolve that through the breathing and the movement.
Well, Feldenkrais actually combined
typical.
4 things, would you believe?
Mm.
And we often don't pay a lot of attention to the feeling or the emotional part of it, but it is something that's always part of the package. And so
Sometimes I think bringing attention, because especially with young kids, and I had a young girl I was sort of assisting, and she couldn't go to school because she was too anxious, exactly for the reasons that you were just saying. You know, she was thinking that all these people were thinking things about it, but they weren't. And so I didn't go there because I thought it might be a bit confronting, and she just got great benefit out of just the mindful movement.
Yep.
You know, I think it depends on the type of mental,
absolutely,
sort of challenge you've got.
But hopefully we want to know that she's aware that she feels better, even if you haven't discussed it.
She's great. She's going to go back to school, so it's fantastic.
Well done.
Yeah.
Terrific. Next group.
We did old people, seniors.
Well, make up your mind. Which one?
Well, depends who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to my mother, it's old people.
Okay.
If I'm talking to a client, it's seniors.
Right.
Most of our ideas have been stolen. I don't know what we could add. But I guess for movement, some of the negative things would be I'm too old to move. I'm 70. I'm whatever age I am. I've never done that before. I'm not sporty. We didn't do that as kids. This is young fellas stuff, young people stuff. My arthritis won't let me do that. It's okay for you. You're young. I love being called that. In the learning, I guess, we've kind of covered that a little bit too, is the too old to learn. Learn by mistakes, not self-exploration. So people tend to not learn by actually exploring things rather than, I made a mistake, I'll fix it type thing. I can't get on the floor, it's too far away. I have injuries that stop me from doing this, so I won't be able to do it. I don't know how to do it, so I can't do it. Illness prevents me from doing it. So, there's a whole bunch of senior excuses. How's that? All right. Trying to be more positive, right? This positive Feldenkrais language. So how could you bring them into awareness in a way that would allow change? One of the things I've been using recently that I found actually quite powerful is when someone says, I can't do that, or, I can't do that. I just say, yet. And sometimes the change, I got a couple of people where the change, they just went, oh, and just stopped for a moment. Just like the idea that, okay, well, I can't do it now, but I might be able to later. I found that actually quite powerful, and I'm pretty lazy. So I don't want to explain stuff. I'll just wait for them to say, I can't do it yet. Sorry? Exactly, yet. No, I'm going to get there, trust me, maybe the next segment. Arthritis is not the end of the game. Like a lot of people are told they've got arthritis, so that's it, right? So, but it's not really. It's just the start of a new way of living.
Is that next week's answer to what's your advertising going to be?
Arthritis.
Right. The first day of the rest of it.
Love your arthritis. The other one I came up with also, like how to bring people into awareness, is explaining a little bit about brain plasticity. That, and if you've ever trained dogs, you'll understand that old dogs actually can learn new tricks. Dogs, they do. They stay young. You want an old dog that stay young. Just keep teaching them tricks, and they just keep wanting to learn. So, I train dogs. So, just in case you're wondering, so I didn't make it up. Brain plasticity was the other one. So, is that it? I think we covered it. Yeah, that was great. Thanks. Who's next?
Hey, hang on. What are you going to do about it?
What am I going to do about what?
All these beliefs.
All these beliefs. That's what I said. Come into yet, teach me about brain plasticity.
Oh, right. Okay.
Possibilities. Arthritis is not the end game.
Yep. Okay. Cool.
It's the beginning of your new life.
Yep.
You're not dead yet.
You're not dead yet. There's still hope. Okay. So skipping right to the other end of the spectrum.
Yep, children. So we discussed primary school age children in our group, and we decided that our biggest barrier was the rules and shoulds and always and nevers of the parents and the teachers. I think with the parents, a big part of it is either my child is fine, why do they need to do anything extra? Or the other part is, well, there's a label or a diagnosis and you can't fix that, so then why should they be doing this? So I guess trying to find a direction to help them understand that it's increase the potential regardless of diagnosis. So their potential of learning and I guess, their emotional awareness, all sorts of things that are linked to what we do, that we experience ourselves when we do an ATM. We know the difference of what we've learned and the FIs. I guess we talked more about ATMs in the school rather than FIs, but I mean, ideally you do both. So the perceptions of teachers that we discussed was that when a child is moving, they're not focused. So their idea, or what we thought their idea of a focused child, was a child that was not moving was a focused child. So in primary school, I've got a son that's just finished grade prep. What I noticed was that there's a lot of constraint on how they move in the classroom, in terms of he has to be cross-legged. So he comes home and he says, "Mummy, it really hurts to sit in that position all the time." And I think to myself how I would be if I had to sit through all these talks that we have and I had to just sit in cross-legged. And I would find that really hard, not having the option of moving into side sitting, or my legs extended, or, you know, they really narrow down their options by just saying you have to sit in cross-legged. And they're in that position quite a fair bit, or when they're sitting at their desk, you know, they're just sitting in that chair at the desk. And yeah, I guess they're barriers that we have. And what was the other thing that we talked about? We mentioned the child themselves. The barriers would be that perhaps they'd rather be playing with their peers' activities, or watching TV, or playing on the iPad, rather than doing the ATM. And I find this a challenge with my own children, is trying to help them understand the importance of that, and then trying to make it fun so that they want to do it. Yeah, I think, you know, when we're on the ground doing an ATM, we're very curious, or, you know, that's ideally we're playful and curious. And that feeling of playfulness and curiosity, we have so much when we're babies. You know, the baby is there and it's really internal and curious about itself and how it moves, and it learns so much in that state. But as we get older, we become more interested in the external environment, and our internal isn't as important anymore. So trying to get them to be aware that, hey, there is that internal world, that you can be in the internal and external at the same time. But, you know, I guess today we tend to be external and trying to find joy in that. So I guess ATMs are good in trying to bring that. So we talked about how do we get them to understand the importance, so it doesn't, so where would they conflict with the intentions in teaching ATM? So I guess one of the things is getting them there in the first place to let us do ATMs in the classroom. So Di talked a little bit about, oh, she's gone.
She's
okay.
gone.
And I guess there's an awareness now that yoga and mindfulness are important to do. And then how do we get the teachers to understand the difference? Because we could play along while, you know, we do the same sort of thing, in that we've got mindfulness in what we do, and we have the movement helps relax you like you relaxed after yoga. Because I think there's a sort of thought that it relaxes you so you can focus better. So we tried to think about how we would go about, do we try and play the role that we're similar to mindfulness and yoga, or do we try and explain that we've got some added things in terms of self-regulation? Silvana mentioned that, and I thought that was one of the really good key strategies, that we could help them understand how we're different to those things, in that, you know, if you know your orientations and directions better, then perhaps you can put your jumper or t-shirt on your own better. You know, there are some kids that can't even put their socks on or their pants on, but maybe if they understand more about themselves and how they use themselves, they're able to do that. Or they can open their bag independently, their school bag on their own, and get out, you know, certain things. I know some kids don't peel their own banana because they can't do it themselves. They don't know what direction to do it or how to actually break it open. And then, you know, you can put that into the pen and paper tasks, you know, fine motor activities. How do you, if you don't know directions within yourself, how do you then draw different things, a circle, an X, or how do you then move yourself in those directions? And, you know, that's very related to learning. I could go on for ages, but I'll just get a few down my story. I'll wrap it, yes.
I'm just going to add the point on self-regulation, because I think the teachers can be a real barrier to thinking, how can this help, and from the teacher's perspective, there's so much responsibility on their shoulders in the classroom, and I really feel for teachers. So, you know, a way into trying to explain this method to teachers that might appeal to them is to get them to understand that, you know, by bringing more awareness, by getting the children to become more aware of their movement and their emotions and the relationship between them and against them, that, you know, that brings some of attention to self-regulation, and maybe then there's less of the shouting, you know, sit up straight, keep still, etc., that they have to do.
Yeah. You've certainly got two strands to think of in that context. The engaging the kids, and one of the things you said, you know, they might prefer to be playing with their friends. It struck me that rather than ATM being a solitary activity, maybe it can be more adapted to being a small group activity. That if they worked in groups of 3 and the question was, you know, can you find a way to bring your shoulder away from your knee? Can you do it by watching and collaborating as a small group, as a little team, to find these things rather than having to do it in your own space? It still has the advantage of training attention and bringing awareness and sustaining activity, generating options, curiosity, that sort of thing. But maybe with the social aspect, it makes it more possible for kids to join in. But, you know, there certainly is stuff around now that can be used to persuade the decision makers about the importance of self-regulation, awareness training, attention training, those sorts of things. And yet, you know, I was up in Cairns doing a workshop late last year, and there were some teachers in the group who said that the directive had come through that children should not be seen in the playground or on the oval in prime learning hours, which are now apparently considered 9 till 12. That, you know, that's obviously not considered prime learning if there's running around or moving or activity, and prep should not be in the sandpit, likewise in prime learning time. You know, they're all supposed to sit still and eyes front and legs crossed, which, as I said, yeah. So, yeah. Okay. So,
I think you summed it up. But I think generally getting the idea across that a flexible mind and body go together, and learn, if kids or people learn that there is other options and other possibilities that can carry over into day-to-day life. Just if you know that you can find other options to move or different options, you might even think how to solve other problems at home, in school, in mathematics.
Absolutely.
Just look at it at a different angle and learning that there isn't just one angle.
Yep. Actually, also from a Queenslander in that same group, came the idea that the brain has kind of 2 ways of working. One is output to the muscles and the organs and the body systems, controlling our activity. And things like gym activities and some of those sorts of more exercise type programs are about training the output side of the brain. Things like Feldenkrais method train the input side. So developing sensory awareness, developing attention, developing the capacity to take information in to inform the brain allows it to make better output choices because it's got a richer set of information to work with. And that's our niche, which is different from exercise. And I quite like that idea that we know that movement and touch are great carriers of information into the brain. And so if we want to engage brain plasticity, then working through movement and touch are the doorways, if you like. Like that one? Great. So that kind of, sort of validates exercise as having its own place without kind of having to get into an argument, but it gives us a different niche. Mm.
I was just, it was evoking for me hearing your conversation, my experience of taking meditation into schools in England, and just some lessons in terms of what was really effective was to have a core group of teachers who invited another teacher watch video presentations of kids in classrooms doing, and I mean, because Feldenkrais is so visually evident, I think it would be effective, and that just had quite an amazing impact where the teachers got it, they wanted to learn it, and they wanted to go and apply it, and that I mean, I know there are all sorts of institutional barriers, but that was one way to get the motivation there to overcome the barriers that you're speaking of.
Yeah, and it'd be good to have conversations with Kath and Di about, how they're starting to share what they're doing and what can be built from that, taking the example and the evidence of their stuff elsewhere.
Just from my experience, at the moment in Queensland, prep teachers, Queensland, I might say that there's a lot of movement in my classes. We didn't sit still.
Good.
So in Queensland at the moment, teachers are struggling with the fact that the system is insisting that children begin their formal learning when they're four and a half. And teachers know intuitively that most of them, especially the little boys, are not ready to do that. And it's anything that can be done to help them, help these children find a way to cope with this, because the system is insisting.
We could call it transition from freedom.
Exactly. No, I think transition through freedom. I mean, it's because New South Wales beat us in NAPLAN. Who's us? Your Queensland at the moment? Okay. They did, and now ours has matching that. Yeah. So our prep was play-based, and now prep children have sight words. They have to read at a certain level by the end of prep, and have to write. Have to write little sentences, and I've been a supply teacher now and watched them try to even get their pencils to hit the paper, and I'm like, it's horrible. So I think teachers are really struggling with that because they know it's wrong. And so I think there's a pathway there to teachers, But having said that, I'm looking for ways that you can do ATM with children. Like I've always done things like brain gym with my classes and whatnot, in which I know what to do and I've seen the benefit of it. But actually ATM, I'm really curious for resources in that area. I think Sylvana's working on that.
Yep. Yeah, an ATM doesn't have to be 45 or 60 minutes long lying on the floor. Yep. Yep.
There's one thing I thought it might be useful also, and probably a selling point. You know, aggression and anger is a big issue in schools and classes, so connected to bullying and everything. And I thought there could be a good selling point with saying that, you know, self-monitoring and breathing and anger control could be something which Feldenkrais would be of benefit.
And I mean, why are kids getting angry and agitated? And my guess is because they're being forced to fail at things. They haven't got enough resources to find acceptable options. So helping kids learn strategies of, okay, I can't get there this way, what else can I do? It's got to be useful for anybody.
And I think some schools are particularly interested in that at the moment, and I think in some ways struggling to integrate it into the classroom. But I just wanted to, without arguing your point that exercise is external and ours is internal, blah, blah, blah. A lot of exercise groups at the moment, or like depending on what their approach is, are very interested in how certain activities affect your self-image. So particularly with children, working with a whole range of children, whether they be refugee or whether they have a fairly stable home, seeing how learning how to do things in a non-challenging and a non-competitive environment can change how they feel in the world and how they interact with each other as well, and how they can learn more about themselves through learning about their own movement. So I think that I often struggle here going between the two worlds, because there is a bit of a schema going on of like, well, what do you do there and what do you do here and how is it different? And I think that be careful not to think that other people aren't interested in the broader context of
Absolutely.
what's going on.
Yep. Absolutely. Cool. Any more on kids?
I suppose at the other end of the spectrum, BCE equivalent, where I teach, I mean, I think students can get really locked into achievement. I've got to get this score, blah, 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 blah. And I've seen students really, really locked in that. And that I was able to teach because I was doing movement half an hour a week this year or last year. And one girl actually just reported that through doing that, she unlocked that anxiety pattern that she was in that was totally unproductive for her. So it happens at the other end as well. Can be.
I was just about to say, when we talk about children, we kind of know that they're beginning their journey and they're little learning sponges, and we can help support that learning and the foundations. But everything we say about kids, you could take to any of these other groups as well. That, you know, if you're in pain, you need to learn these same things of finding options, self-regulation, paying attention to small differences, what makes things better or worse. And same with the oldies, same with any of the groups. That you know, sometimes it's kind of clearer when we think about little people, but often the same kind of ideas are useful everywhere.
Should we segue into office work?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Doc. Go on. Go on, Fiona.
It was probably just taking on from what a few people said about that constraining the children a bit more to sit cross-legged and whatnot. And just when you said something then, I've forgotten it a bit now, but it was not only do the teachers are more careful about, you know, not touching children, that's something I notice a lot, but even the kids are discouraged from touching each other. So because I sit in the class a bit, and there's a lot of keep your hands to yourself, don't touch, don't. So they got not only limited on it's got to be academic, but emotionally you're not allowed to look for reassurance from another human. It's really, yeah. Anyway, so Feldenkrais should help that too.
Thank you. Okay, let's have it in the office now.
So I suppose there's a really obvious link between sit up straight at school to be an efficient worker. Productivity is increased if you sit up straight at your desk and pump out that work. And you would be seen to be more efficient if you did manage to stay still for hours on end, working away, plugging away at it. So that's where we come to office workers. And
so they sit down, that's one of the rules, and they get RSI, that's another rule. They have to sit up straight, keep your wrist straight, and additionally they have to smile all the time because the general public might come in and then they have to speak on the phone politely, so they've got to be prepared to move between things very quickly and keep up this appearance, so they have to work really hard. And if they relax, it's like I go to the gym after work to stretch out my kinks and I have to work out really hard. I'm likely to have a lot of neck and shoulder pain. This is just part of my job. I don't breathe very much because I'm sitting down a lot and I don't have a lot of time to, during my busy day in the office, because I've got to attend to all these other things outside of me, I don't have much in time to pay attention to my own breathing. You never dance on the job. You do never, ever, ever lie on the floor to relax. You always read the computer screen and you are very careful about the way you use your neck and head, and you make sure that everything is within reach of your arms so you can keep your eyes fixed on that computer screen while reaching over for the stapler, picking up the telephone to speak to somebody and putting that piece of paper underneath the second one at the same time as not losing that email. So there's a lot of those kinds of things happening. They develop really great organisation, and that's almost a strength because they've got this capacity to flex around a bit. But as a result of being in this environment, no thinking is allowed, or a lot of thinking is required. A lot of thinking is required. I know my job. This is what I believe about learning. I train for this. I work in this. That's it. I'm scared that I'm going to be in pain. And in the background of what they're doing, I often find they're going, oh crap, I've got RSI, my shoulders really hurt, my neck hurts every week. I take this stress home with me. I am not happy. They try very hard to relax, and they can be desperate for relief. But because they've got this flexibility, that sort of kind of sets them up as they are interested in ATMs because they like organisation and stuff, so that's a way to get in. But because they have very ordered thinking and you have to work hard and you've got to complete all the tasks, you might find it hard for them to be internal and pay attention and do things slowly. They're not used to feeling and sensing very much because you don't go looking for stuff, it comes to you. You separate work and pleasure, so movement at work and the pleasure of movement aren't connected in your life. You have a concept that you have to work hard to achieve results, and you wouldn't get the unlogical little connections between the movement sequences sometimes in ATMs. So for us to look at how to ease them in, laugh a lot, do lots of soft and light movements and emphasise that kind of softness and lightness within, so the learning strand and the movement strand together. Keep your lesson flow moving. Make small changes where it's easy so that they can make smaller changes where they hurt. So don't ignore the hurt. Help them to learn to things like palming the eyes is an amazing thing for just making my system slow down. That works well. Seated ATMs, if you're somebody who works in sitting and you need to learn to figure out how to move yourself a little bit in sitting, do an ATM where you're sitting down. Ask very straight questions in the ATMs when you're working with them so that they can track stuff slowly and easily so that you slow them down. Foreground pleasure, the pleasure of actually being able to move freely, and start with simple ATMs they can do more easily. And if you can, to foreground the connections through the flow of the whole movement through all of you, so you get to feel that sensation of movement through all of you, so that can give you more opportunity to find ease in your learning environment. That's where we got to.
We also we also had that stress is just part of work. So we could look at how you can move quickly without rushing. So you can like pace. So one of the things is pace versus speed. So when you slow the move, like obviously, like lens puncher, you know, you can slow the movement down into process so you can become more productive.
So that's kind of linking your idea back to something that has value in their model of the world.
Yep.
Great.
Also, one of the schema they might have is that resting, i.e. coffee break, walking breaks, blah, whatever, bathroom break, they go, oh, I'm just going out for a coffee break, thinking it's kind of naughty, but actually rest periods are really important. But in their schema, it's I'm bludging because I'm not at my desk. So one of the things you can look at is making it clear that, you know, if you keep trying at something, then have a rest in your ATM, then come back to it, it's easier. So reinforcing that rest periods are very important for productivity. So you're actually getting your job done better by not staying stationary for so long. Yeah.
I've noticed Zoran's tending to use the word refresh rather than rest, which is a concept that's a little more in line with that.
Yeah.
And one of the metaphors that I've been using is the idea that when we're working on the computer, every now and again we have to stop and hit save and allow the computer to kind of refresh the screen so that nice language you could introduce.
Yeah, office workers love that whole jargon of like they are a computer. I used to. When I used to work in an office, I was like, yeah, I'm like rebooting.
I've just closed all my windows.
Oh, we're only Mac-based now. Anyway, so one of the things that would conflict with your intentions in teaching an ATM is that exploring options would sound really grand to them, lying on the floor and doing movements, but it would be kind of an abstract construct, considering that a lot of the times at work, power structure and procedures and whatever else are already set in stone. But, you know, some managers do look for things that processes that can be streamlined or made better or, you know, made easier somehow. But a lot of the times they're just like, no, that's how the boss wants it. That's how it's done. So trying to have that idea that they can explore options within the workplace they would have a mental block like, oh, okay, yeah, that sounds great for you.
Or my boss won't listen.
Or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, but there are assumptions about our own fixedness, but also about the fixedness of the people and the systems around us. And so loosening up some of that might in fact help them discover that there could be options in the environment as well.
People's perceived struggles could be the way they're orienting themselves. Like I have a best friend who was like, oh, after lunch, everyone's so bitchy to me because he was a bank teller. And one day he didn't have his Freddo Frog when he had his carbs. So he didn't have this sugar carbs kind of binge that made him lethargic. And he's like, everything's different. It's because I was a total bitch to everyone that they were just responding in kind. So anyway, yeah.
It's always good to check some of those things.
Focusing on their comfort, another thing that they could conflict with the ATM teaching is focusing on their comfort is a waste of time. Like, you know, well, how can I be comfortable and productive? It's just like, total non sequitur. As you said, not used to feeling and sensing. And working hard is achievement and achieves greater yields. So
actually, that's a really, really interesting belief as to how would you know if someone's working hard
versus whether they're
bludging. So if you, those of you who have had some experience in a workplace, if you think about your colleagues and you think about who works hard, what's the evidence? Is it that they come in early and stay till everyone else has gone home?
For a lot of managers, yes.
Is it that they've got their head down and they don't talk to anyone, but they actually finish at 9 minutes to 5 and they're out the door? Is it that they kind of are moving around a lot and chatting to everybody with bunches of paper in their hand all day? What's the evidence? And I mean, certainly some workplaces have a measure of I've produced X widgets, or I've dealt with so many clients, or answered so many phone calls. But in many places, it's kind of a little more hidden as to whether you've been productive. But productivity and working hard are quite different things.
Yeah.
And so some workplaces will have a culture of, well, you know, we expect you to work hard, and we're not actually going to tell you how we measure that. But it may mean that we expect you to be there at 7:30 and not go home till 6:15. Or it may mean that we expect you to, you know, behave in these particular ways. So it's a really interesting thing to check out, to start to raise as an issue and get people to explore and talk about. There's some requests for the microphone.
Socially, that's pretty common, right? Like this idea of effort. At my kids' school, going back to the working with kids stuff, one of the teachers, and me and my children made a huge joke about it, because one of the things that he used to assess was effort.
Yep.
Like, how the f do you measure effort? You know, like, so we figured that he had a secret effort-ometer, so that he would be able to come out and just touch the kids with it to see who's running as hard as they can and who's only putting in 80%. And that's what he would do. He would give them a percentage of the effort they put into his class. And for my youngest son, who hated this teacher, turning up was about 110. So, you know, the idea that he would then measure him again, it's ludicrous. How, you know, what do you stack this effort on? You know, sometimes the marks that people use for these things just...
Yeah, and that's been a kind of a common myth around much of Western culture anyway, is that, you know, life is better, or you're better if you're giving 110%, whatever that might mean. And so people find all kinds of ways of trying to exhibit the behaviour of 110% whilst actually surviving, because 110% is actually not sustainable. Yeah. Determination rather than effort. Is engaging. Is that what you want? Yeah.
And we obviously do need to measure it and congratulate those students that do have it. Hey. Okay.
There are a whole lot of strategies for being productive. One is staying engaged on task for a sustained period of time. Another is being able to take sufficient time to process the nature of the task, the options for finding a solution, and the strategies for delivering that before taking action. Another might be to actually engage in questioning and discussion to clarify things. So it's a bit of a fraught area that what are we measuring, and how do we know we're measuring what we think we're measuring? Because all of us learn very early in life to display behaviours that get the approval, even if they're not actually
behaviours that meet the goal.
Doing what we thought people were doing.
Yeah.
So we could get a little bit off track. Silvana was going to say something. So have you guys got some more on your office things? In a minute, Silvana.
I was happy for them. Oh no, it was just on the same point. So I was just going to say, working hard or effort or determination. It's interesting to think of those terms for me in the context of fact versus perception.
Yep.
Because I think in the workplace, you can be super efficient and have great outcome, but if you've done that 9 to 5 and you're leaving 5 o'clock all the time, there's the perception that you still haven't done enough,
Yes.
even though the output's there. And so for me, determination's a bit tricky because you can be determined as hell to work hard at work and be there at 8 and finish it at 9. So perception-wise, yep, determined, good on ya. Where's the output though? So sort of those, it's just interesting.
Yeah, that's certainly the reality.
Same with on the floor, ATM, effort, fact and perception can be two really different things.
And so effort's, one of our Feldy words. We talk about reducing effort. But we don't want Feldenkrais to be associated with this myth that it's all about, being a blob and just flopping about and never engaging with any kind of force or efficacy. That it's a strategy we use in the learning thread to make more space for discovering options and trying different things and maybe reducing some of the excess tonus and so forth. But it's in order that we can be more powerful, productive, happy, busy, whatever it is that we want to do with it.
Are you saying this is smarter learning for more powerful life?
Well, there's a little catchphrase for you. Okay, you guys?
Last thing, how to bring them into the awareness that would allow change. Getting them to notice their breathing.
Mm-hmm.
So that would help them focus on whether they're pace versus speed. Having them change between soft focus, having them keep soft focus and change focus between blah or whatever. And being able to do that without holding your breath or whatever manifestation that takes on in the workplace where you're stressed and doing what Margaret said, toggling between all these different things. And then anti-gravity muscle responses to avoid holding patterns when they're at the desk.
Cool. And so what that kind of suggests to me is that rather than just a simple scan at the beginning and scan at the end, or reference movement or reference activity, that giving people kind of reference games or reference activities to take back into their life that they can use on a regular basis might be really helpful in terms of actually sustaining change or taking the value to where you
giving
want
them
it.
something they can take back to their desk, even though they're not lying on the floor at their desk, or they might not be sitting in a chair with their hands on their knees at their desk. They can focus on certain aspects of ATM that can help them in their job feel more comfortable.
Yep. Fantastic. Cool. And pass the microphone across all the way to Carol.
Okay.
I know it's not the majority, but there is there's a huge movement towards how we design offices now to allow people, a bit more freedom of movement, space, time. But the reality is that many individuals, and I work with many people like this and have witnessed them in when I go to do, like design analysis of, call centers and things like that. A lot of people just like to stay fixed and work for long hours and can be very productive. And even when the time comes to go home, they just keep working. And because the amount of work they have to do is just ongoing, there's no start and end. So there's that sort of problem. But so how the individual perceives their working days is crucial, really. And I think a lot of this still comes back to the anxiety of work. Even when you design good workplaces, people still work incredibly long hours, even though they can go and lie in a lounge here or go to the coffee shop or, have little meetings.
But that's a
and move
cultural
around.
thing, isn't it?
It is. It's a very, it's a mindset that we, really has to be addressed with the individual as well. Not saying that the employment side of it's necessarily good, but you see the cultures of these big banks and that, like Macquarie Bank and that, and their fit outs and their offices, they're incredible places, I can tell you. But the culture is just so focused that there is no start or end of your day. So it's really up to the individual to learn that, and to learn you can be getting up and moving around a lot. So often, even if you want to choose to work in that environment, you have to take a bit of responsibility for it, I think.
So ATM, you guys look so grown up now. After being up there with the baby ones. You're doing great. So you've kind of got ATM teaching sort of handled now. You have. And that's fantastic. And so this is kind of now the evolution of how are you going to use it? How are you going to help bring it to people in a way that they can actually get the benefits and change their lives? I mean, it's all very well to go on Wednesday night and roll around the floor, have a nice time, and then go out the door and what's changed. But there's the before of, and this is kind of your discussions now for the coming week, is how do you use these insights and ideas in your advertising, if you like, in what you say and what you write that will encourage people to come and lie on your floor or allow you into their workplace or their school or their aged care home or whatever it happens to be. And then how do you help them actually really get the benefit so that the world is a better place? Their individual worlds and our shared world. That's the bigger picture. That was Moshe's vision. He was part of the human potential movement in San Francisco and Esalen and all around that. He was talking with the movers and shakers at that time.
He was a mover and a shaker.
He certainly moved, and I wouldn't be surprised if he shook occasionally as well. Okay, we have got so enthusiastic, we've gone well into lunchtime, and I have to apologise for that. Julie will be expecting you back around 2. So, thank you. So, 2, that's what Julie said. And so you've got the part 2 question. We'll come back next week and chat some more about that. Okay? Some headlines.